Brian, why do you think this is? How is Airbnb beating its own records before we were in a global pandemic?
Yeah, Emily, it's a great question. I think the reason we had our best year in our company's history is two reasons. Number one, our model is inherently adaptable. We have millions of types of homes in nearly every community at nearly every price point all over the world. So that means that however travel changes, we're able to adapt. And one of the big things we're seeing is people are staying longer. Because many people don't have to go back to the office 5 days a week, it means people are going to thousands of communities all over the world, staying for weeks, months, or entire seasons at a time. So that's happening. At the same time, people are starting to return to cross-border travel and go to cities. So that's been a huge tailwind. But the other reason is I think it really comes down to our DNA. At our core, we're a design-driven company. That's our real core approach. Joe and I went to design school, and last year, we did over 150 upgrades and innovations that touched every aspect of the service. So I think between our adaptable model and our relentless innovation, I think that explains why we probably had our best year in our company's history.
Well, on that note, I believe you're living on Airbnb this year.
Oh, yeah.
You're joining us from Miami, living with your puppy, your new puppy, Sophie. Any learning so far about what needs to be changed, what's working or not working about long-term stays? I'm sure you're taking notes.
I am absolutely taking notes, and I send a list of notes to my team. Obviously, it works quite well. We made 150 upgrades, and it's great to be able to experience it. One thing I learned is it's important to have really good Wi-Fi, especially if you're going to do earnings calls and TV interviews. So Wi-Fi is a must. The more you work out of a home, you want to have a desk, you want to have a chair, so you want to make sure you have more amenities. And I really feel like the longer you're away from home, the more you want to have the comforts of home in a space. And so a lot of this is going to come back to us, continue to educate hosts about how they can continue to accommodate people that aren't just traveling, but they're actually living in those places for weeks or even months at a time. So I think this is really interesting. And of course, traveling with a dog is quite interesting. I've chosen Airbnbs that have backyards and pools. Golden retrievers love water. So I bring Sophie. She's a 7-month-old golden retriever. I feel like travel is a good education even for dogs. So, right. She's having a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm requesting some pictures of Sophie after this earnings interview is over. Look, Microsoft just called people back to the office February 28th. It is happening. When more people do go back to work, inevitably, what does that mean for long-term stays?
Well, let's first of all, I don't think CEOs are going to determine whether people return to the office. They might determine it for a short time, but in the long term, it's going to be the employees, because we're all competing for the very best talent. And I think what most people have said is they don't want to return back to the office 5 days a week. But even if people do, a lot of people return back to the office, all you have to believe is they're not going to go back 5 days a week. Maybe some people will be like me and they're living nomadically. I know that's not for everyone. If you have kids, you can't do that. But we do think more and more people are going to work remotely over the summer with family. They might take them somewhere, get a summer rental. But we also just think that we're going to have 3-day weekends a lot more frequently for people, where they might work from an Airbnb on a Friday or a Monday and go away for that weekend, maybe with their family or on their own. So I think that we can adapt. Again, all you have to believe is that the world has changed to believe that travel's changed. I don't think we're ever going backwards. We're going forwards. The faster the world changes, the more you want to innovate. But by the way, if the world were to go back to the way it was, well, the majority of business before the pandemic was cross-border travel and urban. So those would be massive tailwinds for us.
So let's talk about cross-border. When is that international travel boom going to happen? When are we going to get back to that? When you look at US to Europe specifically, when you look at Asia, where things have been tougher to open up?
Yeah, obviously that's probably, that question is probably best answered by health experts, because they would be able to give the best guidance to when people are actually going to feel comfortable traveling. It depends on what the restrictions are. But what we are seeing is that cross-border travel is growing. It is now, once again, a third of our business. At our low point, cross-border travel was only 20% of our business. Now, before the pandemic, it was about 50%. So we are starting to recover. I'm not going to speculate on the health crisis and where we're at. But what I will say is that the longer people can't travel, travel is one of those things where the longer you don't do it, the more you want it. There are other things where when habits break, you're not looking to do it again. But I think people can only stay home, only play so many video games, only watch so many shows on Netflix before they really want to get out of the house. And I think there's a yearning to be able to travel all over the world. And with more flexibility, I think you're going to actually see a lot more international trips than even before the pandemic.
Okay, but prices are going up. We're seeing inflation, certainly here in the United States, and the average day rate going up on Airbnb. Why is that happening, and how much higher does it go?
Well, there's a number of reasons why the average daily rate is going up. I mean, yes, inflation is contributing to prices increasing in a lot of platforms, but this is a very important point. The primary reason that our average daily rate went up, and it did, and that was, of course, really good for our business, is because of actually a mix shift. Before the pandemic, we had a lot of bookings in Asia, for example. The average daily rate in Asia is much lower than than North America. So we had a mix shift towards North America and Europe, but we also had a mix shift from 1-2 bedroom places for people traveling for business or like couples, people traveling solo, to entire families booking Airbnbs, and non-urban markets like vacation rental markets, they're booking 3, 4, 5 bedroom homes. And so that mix shift is the primary reason that ADR is going up. But of course, inflation affects, I think, all platforms.
Now, you recently solicited some feedback on Twitter, and the top suggestion was crypto payments. How much progress are you making? When is it going to happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is the #1 requested feature on the Airbnb, at least for people on Twitter. And we are absolutely, as promised, looking into crypto payments. I don't have anything to announce right now, but I will say a couple things. #1, I don't think people realize that Airbnb is already one of the larger payments platforms on the internet. Since we started, we've handled $330 billion through our platform. And we are well aware that one of the big use cases for crypto is to be able to handle money in a lot of countries where they don't have the same robust banking systems. Well, Airbnb is one of the most international companies on the internet. We're in 220 countries and regions, every country in the world, but North Korea, Iran, South Sudan, Crimea, and just a few others. So I think there's a lot of opportunities here. I don't have anything to announce, but I do think that the ideology and the values of crypto, community, economic empowerment, are very familiar to us in our community over the last 14 years.
Brian, you recently had an entertaining series of tweets with Box CEO Aaron Levie talking about Web3, saying, I believe with a little dose of sarcasm that you think we might as well build the whole internet over again. Is Web3 more hype than reality? What does it mean for Airbnb if we can just, go to a homeowner directly and we don't need a platform? And I mean, people are buying virtual plots of land, virtual properties. Where is this going?
Well, it's hard to say where it's going. I don't think anyone would have guessed in the mid-90s where the internet was going to go, but I'll say just a couple things. #1, I don't think any serious person thinks we're going to rebuild the internet. The internet is actually pretty decentralized as it is, by the way. But I do think the technology, the blockchain technology, is incredibly exciting, and there are a lot of opportunities that we're looking at. I think if an entrepreneur is building on the blockchain, it's important to remember, if you're a Web3 business, you're kind of in the community business. So I think it's important people to remember that. And if you financialize a community from the very beginning, the stakes get higher. The other thing with an entrepreneur is that being able to adapt and change is critical. But when you build things that are immutable and unchangeable, you just got to be very thoughtful about which things you're going to hard code in. But I do think that at the end of the day, all that really matters is, do you provide an incredible service at a great value to other people? Whether it's this world, Web3, or any other dimension that we're talking about, human nature applies to all of those. And so these basic fundamentals will still exist.